Hello, everyone. My name is Kaoru Miyazawa. Today, we are exploring the architecture of the peer review process and how this process is the very foundation of your dissertation committee. In academia, peer review is our central nervous system. It is how we ensure that the knowledge we share is rigorous, ethical, and valid. This peer review culture is translated into our work and doctoral program, especially in committees work. Being a doctoral student is not just about getting a degree. It is about transforming your mindset and disposition from a student into a scholar. This presentation reflects my view on how these two worlds, the academia and the doctoral program, intersect, focusing on the peer review process to help you develop a professional identity and to be able to interact and communicate with your doctoral committee members smoothly. Review process. Simply put, it is an evaluation process where independent experts in a specific field vet an academic paper before it reaches the public. In the field of education, there are three types of reviews. Among these three, double blinded reviews is most dominant. Double blinded reviews mean that the author doesn't know who the reviewers are, and the reviewers don't know who the author is. This removes personal biases and then focuses purely on the merit of the research. Peer review is necessary in academia. There are basic six reasons: quality control, verification, error gap detection, professional credibility, improving quality, and fostering discourse. So I will start with one, quality control. So those who are in academia already have high expectations for our scholarly community, and then we serve as gatekeepers to keep the quality high. The second reason for peer review is verification. Peer review process provides a stamp of approval by verifying that the way research was conducted was valid and also the findings are significant. The third reason is error and gap detection. Peer review process points out technical flaws, overlooked research, or gaps in the literature. Four, professional credibility. Passing peer review offers external validation. The credibility is often necessary to obtain faculty positions in universities, and also it is necessary for promotion. The fifth reason for peer review is improving quality of work. Expert feedback refines papers to be more applicable to the journal's specific readership. Finally, peer review foster academic discourses. It creates a professional conversation that advances a field of study, which is the most important reason for peer review. So, how does peer review process work? It starts with author submitting the manuscript to the editor. The editor of the journal will check the manuscript, paying attention to whether the manuscript meets the guidelines and of also the quality of the manuscript is good enough to be shared with reviewers. If the manuscript doesn't meet the expectation, the editor will reject the submission and communicate the result to the author. If the manuscript meets the basic guidelines and expectations, then editor will send the manuscript to normally three reviewers, and those reviewers are usually selected by the editorial board members of the journal. Um, the reviewers will review the manuscript using the guidelines given by the editor, and then they will decide whether the manuscript should be accepted with no revision, accept with revision, or the manuscript should be rejected. Together with those, one of these decisions, each reviewer will also provide very specific comments on what should be revised in what way and why. Um, And then the reviewers individually will communicate with the editor about their decision and then share the comments. Editor will review those comments and then decide whether the journal should accept with revision or reject, and communicate the result to the author. If the decision is accept with revision, editor will also share all these comments the reviewers gave to the editor with the author, and then give the deadline for revision and resubmission. Um, Author will submit the revision, and then editor will review the revision. Expected to incorporate all the comments reviewer each of the reviewers gave to the author. So in response to the reviewers, authors normally are expected to list um, all the revisions they made, detailing exactly how they addressed every single critique each reviewer provided to the author. And then if the author decided not to integrate particular suggestions, the author must explain why. And then um, editor will review that revision, and then the response to the reviewers sent by the author, and then decide whether that manuscript will require another revision, or accept or reject. If it is accepted, the manuscript will be published. If it is accepted with further revision, the author has to go through the same process until the author receives approval from all these three reviewers. So that is the process, and it is a very rigorous and distant process. Um, Reviewers usually do not communicate with each other or do not communicate directly with the author. The author is allowed to communicate with editor if there are specific questions about reviewers' comments or the journal's guidelines. However, the author is not allowed to submit a rough draft of the revision or consult with the editor or the reviewers in the process of revision. Usually they're given only one chance to revise, and if they're not able to make changes that the journal expected after one revision, their manuscript will be rejected. So I want you to remember that peer review process is very rigorous, and formal process. Will apply to your dissertation committee's work. Simple way. Your dissertation writing process and your work with your committee members are very similar to peer review process. We're trying to give you an hands-on experience of the culture of academia, specifically peer review process, by working with you closely as your dissertation committee member. Um, and so the process of a peer review is very similar to how we review your benchmark papers and dissertations, but we are giving you more scaffold in dissertation committee. Let's talk about how peer review process show up in your interaction with your dissertation committee. So as you remember, in peer review process, there was an editor, three reviewers, and an author. In dissertation committee, we do not have an editor, but we have dissertation committee chair, who is your senior advisor and also a committee member. Um, the role that dissertation committee chair plays is very similar to the role that editor of a journal plays. Dissertation committee chair checks whether the candidate's work meets the guidelines and whether the quality is good enough to be sent out to other committee members. Also, dissertation committee chair facilitates communication between committee members, candidates, and a PhD program office. Um, Reviewer 2 and 3 in the peer review process are very similar to the role of committee members. So committee members are experts and they provide um, feedback on candidates' papers quality and identify errors and recommend a decision on benchmark papers and dissertation. In other words, they would say, well, the candidate needs to revise their draft or approve this draft. And they will communicate the result to the dissertation chair um, and to the candidate directly. Author is a doctoral candidate, and then candidate will write benchmark papers like SSP, DSP, and QP, and DSP only for ID students. And then they will also write a dissertation proposal and dissertation based on the program's guidelines. Um, and then candidates are expected to improve their papers and dissertation based on each reviewer's comment. Papers and dissertation overlaps with that of peer review process in publication. This is because the process of review and dissertation was created to prepare doctoral candidates for real peer review process in the near future. However, there are slight differences in the process. In the dissertation writing process and the reviewing process, we provide more scaffolding to the doctoral candidate than we would for authors who are submitting their manuscript to a journal. So the review process starts with a doctoral candidate submitting their manuscript to the chair of the committee, who is usually their senior advisors. The senior advisor, just like editor, will check the draft and then check if the manuscript is meeting the guidelines or not. And also, the chair will check if the manuscript has decent quality. Um, at least it is good enough to be shared with two other committee members. If the chair decides that the quality is good enough and then also it is meeting the guideline, the chair will ask the doctoral candidate to send the manuscript to two other committee members. If the quality is not good enough or it's not meeting the guidelines, the chair will ask the candidate to revise until it meets the expectation. So, this is a process. There is an interaction between chair and the candidate. And after the chair approves it, the candidate will communicate directly with committee members. So committee members, just like reviewer 2 and 3 in journals, peer review process, they will review doctoral candidates' work. And then they will give a very specific comment based on their expertise. Usually they would say the candidate needs to revise this part and that part and add this reading or something, and then they will also explain why. If you do not understand or agree with committee members' comments, doctoral candidates are responsible for communicating with the candidates directly. If there are issues in communication between the candidate and the committee members, and the candidates can go to the chair for consultation, um, and the chair can assist you in providing guidance on how the candidates can communicate better with doctoral committee members. But anyways, doctoral candidates are expected to revise their manuscripts until they get approval from every single committee members, incorporating their comments. Once each committee member approves the candidate's draft, each of them will sign on the title page of the benchmark paper or dissertation, and they will send that to the chair. And the chair will submit the paper, the final version of the paper, and with the title page that incorporates all committee members' signature to the program office. in this presentation, I want you to be clear about your role in the committee and then your relationship to committee members. One most important thing I want you to know is that in this process of writing doctoral dissertation, you are the author and then you are the scholar. It is your work and you're going to put your name on it. And then even though committee members would give you guidance and advice, ultimately your dissertation or your benchmark papers are your work. This means that you will be asked to make various choices while you're writing your dissertation or conducting your research study based on your committee's advice. And then you are expected to explain the choices you ultimately make. In other words, you cannot say, I decided to do this because committee member one told me to do so. It has to be your choice, and you have to defend your choice. Another thing that I want to be clear about is a hierarchy in a dissertation committee. Even though you are a scholar and I want you to have that disposition, you don't have a degree yet. On the other hand, committee members, the chair, committee member two, committee member three hold doctoral degree. We have gone through this process and then earned our degree. And also, we hold our position because of our work by going through peer review process after getting our degree. So we are gatekeepers of the profession. So we are vetting your work. We read your work critically and then make sure that your work meets the standards that we hold in academia. Reasons why we have peer review process apply directly to review process in your dissertation work. There is a hierarchy between committee members and you. It is also important to remember that there is no hierarchy among committee members. Even though chair plays an important role facilitating conversation between you and committee members and among committee members and as well as with PhD program office, it does not mean that chair's view dictate other committee members' views with your committee members. Please remember that each committee member brings in unique expertise and perspectives into your work. Um, their backgrounds and beliefs and training may be different from each other, but each committee member's views are equally important. So please do not think that one's view is better than the other. Although you can ultimately decide to listen to one of the committee members' suggestions and not take in two other committee members' suggestions. In that case, you just need to explain why you made that choice, because ultimately what you do in your dissertation is your choice. But you have to respect with all committee members um, and then communicate professionally. I would say that you benefit actually from different perspectives from different committee members. I talked very briefly about the case when committee members disagree. Please, when you face conflict views suggested by different committee members, I would like you to see that as an opportunity for you to learn. I also want you to remember it is not committee members or chair's responsibility to resolve that conflict. It is your responsibility as a doctoral candidate to communicate with each committee members and then find out why each person is saying something about a certain aspect of your dissertation and then choose the right view that works for you the best. Um, and then it is important that, based on the close communication with committee members, you make an informed decision about which reviewers, which comment to take and which one not to take. And although it is your responsibility, as a chair, senior advisors can support you in make your decisions if that is necessary. But chairs cannot make decisions for you. Um, Also, there are a few other responsibilities. Um, well, after you make certain choices about your dissertation or benchmark papers, you need to explain to all committee members why you made certain choices in a scholarly way. It is not enough to say, well, I decided to write this in this way because reviewer one told me to do so. You have to explain in your own words why you chose to in take in some committee members' view and not others. Um, this is a continuation from the previous slide, but you do have responsibility to revise your drafts based on committee members' comments. It is important that you are accountable. This means that you have a responsibility to communicate to your committee members clearly how you incorporated their comments. If you decided not to incorporate their comment, you have to explain why you decided not to do it. In communicating with your committee members, you should ask each of your committee members how they prefer to communicate to you about the changes you have made. For example, in my case, I ask candidates or my advisees to mark on what sections of your draft you have made changes or not by highlighting the part you have changed. I also ask my advisees to write um, a document called Response to Reviewers' Comment. Um, and you will list all the comments that I have provided, and then you will write down what changes you made based on my comment for each comment that I gave, and also page number. I can confirm that change. Um, if you decided not to incorporate my comments, I would like you to provide reasons why you didn't incorporate my comments. These are the things that authors are required to do as they submit their submit the revision of their manuscripts to journal editors. So it may look like a lot of work which you have not been asked to do in master's level or undergraduate level, but I want you to practice doing this as you prepare to become a scholar. Okay, finally, this is a conclusion. So in this video, we talked about how the work of your committee members overlap with peer review process in academia. As you have seen through this video, the peer review process is a unique and a complicated process. Um, it is a form of mentorship for you to become a competent scholar. So by working with your committee members, you develop some skills and attitude um, to function well in the peer review process as an author and also a reviewer in the future. Um, again, even though you're learning how to be part of this peer review process as an author, as you write your dissertation, I want you to remember that you are in charge of your own work. So you have to take initiatives, you have to make decisions, you have to be accountable. Communicate and work well with your committee members who are your mentors, and then keep that in mind as you work with them. If you have any questions about this video, things I said in this brief video, please feel free to contact me anytime. I think knowing this process, which reflects the culture of academia, will help you communicate and work with your committee members more smoothly. Thank you.